What if the best time for you to start Social Security has nothing to do with age 70? Now, I'm sure you've heard the advice to wait as long as you can, get the biggest check you can, and if you live long enough, then you win. And while that's true, that's only part of the story. And the part it leaves out could matter just as much as the part it puts in. And so I want to talk today about Social Security start dates, where the conventional wisdom is good and where it's not enough, and factors that you should be thinking about in order to make the best decision for you and your spouse. Now, it matters a lot what you do with Social Security because it could be more than $1 million of retirement income coming into your household, depending on how long you live and what your Social Security start amounts are, but it's not insignificant. And so I want to help you think through this decision and make the best decision for yourself. I'm going to talk about 7 factors to consider, and then I'm going to share 3 client stories that could shed some light on how other people are making decisions in real life when it comes to Social Security benefits. Now let's start by talking about what's true. It is true that if you wait, that you will get an 8% delayed retirement credit for each year that you wait. That starts from your full retirement age and continues until age 70. So if your full retirement age is age 67 and you wait to start at age 70, then you've received an 8% delayed retirement credit for 3 years. That's a total of 24% increase in the Social Security benefit. That is meaningful. But the crossover point for waiting, forgoing those 3 years of income in order to get that bigger retirement check, that crossover point for most people is in the mid-80s. Maybe age 83, 84, 85, something around that time frame. Now, a lot of people are living past that age, and you could very well live past that age. And while that is good, that's treating the Social Security decision as if the thing that really matters is the number all the way out at age 85 or 90. And there's a lot more to your retirement than just the number that you have at the end of life. And so that's the reason I want to talk about these other factors that you should be thinking through in order to decide, does it make sense for you to start your Social Security earlier, or does it make sense for you to wait until age 70? First of all, have you ever noticed that it's easier to spend money that's coming in, being deposited into your checking account, than it is to dip into your savings? When you're working, you've got a paycheck coming in, it's a lot easier to spend that money. And then when people retire, they become a lot more focused on where the money's going and cognizant of pulling money out of savings. Once money is in savings, we don't like to pull it out. It feels different to pull that money out and spend it than it does to spend the money that's being deposited there as a paycheck. And that comes into play in retirement as well. Now, if you turn on Social Security, it then becomes kind of like a paycheck. It's coming in every month, and it's a bit easier to spend that money than to dip into savings. So that could help you if you're wanting to spend money in retirement, in those early years, you're wanting to travel, you're wanting to do things. It could be helpful to have Social Security coming in because it could be a little easier to spend a little more money knowing that Social Security is going to hit your checking account every month. Now, one of the things that we usually focus on when we're talking about should you start Social Security earlier or later is how long are you expected to live? How long will you have that Social Security income deposited into a checking account? And so your family history comes into play. How long do people in your family live? What is your health? What is your spouse's health? That comes into play when thinking about your decision to start Social Security. If you come from a family with a good history for living longer and you're in good health and you expect to live a very long time, you may want to delay Social Security. But if you come from a family that doesn't live as long or your health is not as good, you may be thinking you should turn Social Security on earlier so that you are sure to get it for more months. When you make this decision, you do also need to consider your spouse's family longevity. How long will the healthier one of you live? That's how long Social Security income is going to be coming into your household. Because when it comes to Social Security, it is not just about your own benefit, it's about the benefit that you and your spouse receive. So if you turn on your Social Security benefit because you think your health is not as good, but if you're the higher earner, then you've got to think through, is it right to turn it on earlier or should you wait? This will impact the survivor benefit. The survivor gets to collect the higher of the two benefits. Whether that's you, whether that's your spouse, when the first person passes away, whichever of those benefits is the higher benefit, that's the one that will continue coming in. And so you want to consider that because that healthier spouse could live 20, 30 plus years past the point in time when you turn on your Social Security. It becomes a joint decision if you're wanting to really make sure that you have the best Social Security coming in for you and your spouse for as long as either of you are living. When you're considering that, you want to also think about how big will Social Security be compared to everything else you own. What is it relative to your total wealth? Because if Social Security is a smaller percentage of your total wealth, then starting at 62 versus 65 versus age 70 is going to have a smaller impact because your other wealth is going to play a much bigger part. On the other hand, if Social Security is much larger compared to your other wealth, then what age you turn it on will have a bigger impact because the rest of your wealth is playing a smaller part. Now, most of my clients have saved millions of dollars, and so Social Security tends to be a smaller percentage of the total wealth, but it's still an important decision. However, what I want to point out is that the size of your portfolio doesn't determine when you should start Social Security, but it does determine how much flexibility you have in letting all of the other factors drive the decision. It's not just based on needing the income. It becomes about the legacy plan, the tax plan, all of the different pieces in your total retirement picture and what makes the most sense based on everything that you're trying to accomplish. The more other wealth you have, the more flexibility you have around your Social Security decision. Now, when you're thinking about your portfolio, in the early years of retirement, you're in what I call the retirement red zone. That first 5 to 10 years, that's when market volatility is going to have the most impact on your portfolio because you have a lot more years ahead of you. And during that time period, you definitely want to protect the portfolio for the long term. You want to make sure that you have things lined up properly for providing your current income as well as the growth you need for later. Social Security can be useful in that time period to help with that exact situation. If you have turned on Social Security earlier, then you're having to take less from your portfolio, and that means you don't have to dip into the portfolio as much when we have periods of market volatility. That allows your portfolio to achieve more stability and more growth over time because Social Security is doing some of that work during those earlier years. On the other hand, when you turn on Social Security, it's going to impact other things like your taxes. If you turn on Social Security, it becomes taxable income to you. So you want to think through how much room that's going to take up and how much additional room you would have left for doing other things relative to your tax plan. You know, at the point in time that you retire, all the way up until you have to start your required minimum distributions, that is most likely the period of time where you are in the very lowest tax brackets of your retirement years. We call that the gap years. And during those years, you have some room to do some shifting of assets from one bucket to another bucket, moving from the IRA to the Roth IRA by doing Roth conversions, and getting that accomplished at a lower tax bracket so that you can also set yourself up to have lower taxes in the future. You can reduce your future required minimum distributions. You can achieve a higher balance of tax-free funds that go to your heirs. All of these are good things, and you have more room to do that during those gap years. But if you turn Social Security on, it's going to take up some of that room. Now, it could still be a good thing to turn Social Security on during that time period based on all of the other things that I'm talking about. But you want to be aware of the impact and think through which is the most important thing for you to be doing. And how do these things work together? How does everything work together to achieve your overall plan? That will help you then come to a decision on, do you turn Social Security on now? Do you turn it on in a few years? Do you wait all the way to age 70? Sometimes people think that they should wait to have a bigger legacy because they're thinking, well, if I wait, then I'm going to have a bigger amount coming in from Social Security and I can let my own investments grow more and that'll leave more to my heirs. And that might be true. What if you decide that you are going to wait to age 70 because you do want to have the bigger number later on and take less from your portfolio later on? And you get to age 70, you turn it on, and a couple months later, you pass away. Well, you've only gotten Social Security for a few months. What if you had turned it on at age 62, even though you didn't yet need it? You had retired early, you didn't need the Social Security, you turned it on, and you began to put it into an account where it just built up and you saved it. Then if you have that same car wreck or plane crash or whatever happens a couple months after age 70, there's this bucket of money that you wouldn't have had that is there that goes to your heirs. Now that's a bit of an extreme example, but I want to point out that it's always a little more complicated than we think on the surface. We need to think through all of the sides of the decision. And when it comes to your legacy, when to start Social Security will definitely depend on what your other portfolio assets are, as well as how long you're going to live. And so you want to think that through in your situation so that you achieve the goal that you really want to achieve. That leads me to telling you the story of 3 different couples. And the first couple was in that situation that I just talked about. They were going to wait until age 70 to turn on their Social Security because they didn't need the income. And what they really wanted to do was have the biggest amount coming in, but they're very focused on leaving a very solid legacy to their kids and to some causes they care about. And so they want to achieve the best growth there. Now, when we sat down and we looked at their plan, and we actually looked at the amount of money they're spending, how they're invested, how their money is growing, and what Social Security would look like at different ages, we were able to determine that if they turned on their Social Security sooner, that they would be in a better position to leave a stronger legacy. And so they are going to turn their Social Security on early versus waiting all the way to age 70. And even though waiting to age 70 was not the wrong decision for them, it wasn't the best decision for them based on everything else in their situation. Now, another couple who also retired early could use Social Security. It would be helpful to them to turn that on. And yet, because they're not yet 65, they're having to buy health insurance through the marketplace. And in order to minimize the cost of that health insurance, they are keeping their income below certain thresholds. And if they turn Social Security on, it would push them over those thresholds. And so the amount of Social Security income that would come in would immediately go right back out to pay for health insurance premiums. And that doesn't make sense. So they are not turning their Social Security on yet. We looked at their situation and it makes sense for them to turn it on at age 65. That's when Medicare will start. They'll then be able to keep the Social Security income, and that fits perfectly for their situation. The third couple I want to talk about is a couple who are both from families that have very solid longevities. They have moms and dads and uncles and aunts that have lived well into their 90s. They're both healthy and active, and they expect that they'll live into their 90s or maybe even beyond because of medical advances. And so in their situation, it does make sense for one of them, the higher earner, to wait until age 70, because that then is going to protect that survivor benefit so that whichever one of them lives the longest gets that bigger check. And so that is the decision that they've made. Now, these are 3 families, 3 couples, 3 different stories, 3 different times to start Social Security, and yet they are all starting it at the right time for them based upon their situation, based upon all the factors and how all of those factors impact their situation. Now, if you haven't turned on your Social Security yet, think through the priorities that you have in each of these areas. That will help you make the right decision. And if you need some input, you need some guidance to help you prioritize and think through the things that you should consider, talk to a financial advisor that specializes in retirement income planning and Social Security income. And if you don't have someone to talk to, I invite you to go to my website, www.bestpathadvisors.com. While you're there, you can see how I work. And if it seems like we'd be a fit and you want to schedule a conversation, you can do that right there from the site. And we would have a no obligation, low-key conversation about your situation. And if you're a client and you're listening to this, then you know we are talking through these factors. Now, if something has come to mind that you're wondering, should we talk about this little area again? Feel free to send me an email, because you know I always want to make sure that you're on your best path, and I want to always help you think through everything that could impact your retirement. And I look forward to seeing you next week right here for another video. Be sure and subscribe so you don't miss anything. And if you enjoyed this video, give me a like so that I know to do more of these topics to help you be on your best path.